Hey, it's Nicole. Welcome back to the show. So excited to have you and really, really honored to introduce you to our two guests today, Dima and Chinobay. They have a story maybe like yours. As an entrepreneur, we've set out to do something different in the world. And being an entrepreneur, that actually gives us some time, flexibility, and freedom to do just that. Not just chase what we want to do for work, but also what we want to do to fulfill our heart and our mission in life. And so when I bring you these two special guests to talk about how they connected through some touring of the US to impact kiddos' lives and art and education all over.
Hey, if you're an entrepreneur who usually fast forwards intros just like this one, this is the podcast for you.
Serial entrepreneurs.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
Welcome, Chinobay.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having us.
Hey, just a reminder, our show is brought to you by SmartCookie Media, where we believe data tells a story, and not just any story, your business story. As a subscriber to the show or as a client, you'll get insights on profitable, data-driven marketing strategies that work for you and your business, your industry. Not some cookie cutter trends, no. Ideas that are led by your customer data so you know they'll work for you. Connect with me on LinkedIn or Instagram to learn more. Everything's in the show notes. Now, let's get back to the show. Dima, you and I met because you heard another show or you met another guest of ours and we connected over that. So I got to start with you. How would you finish this sentence? You know you're an entrepreneur when?
You fall on your butt and tomorrow you get up and do it all over again.
Sounds like there's a story there that you know what that takes. Yeah.
A number of times. Yeah. My bum is sore from falling.
Which is dangerous because you're in the construction world. So tell us just a little bit about that so we can understand what your background is.
Yeah, for sure. So I studied civil engineering in university and I did about one summer doing a design and I realized that it is just so boring for me. And I wanted to be in front of people, communicating, talking, problem solving, not necessarily sitting and designing a building next to the computer. So I graduated and went to work for a general contracting firm, a medium-sized firm. And I was a big fish on a small project. About 10 years ago, I left, the employment job side and started my own consulting firm and been consulting for developers and builders since for some high profile projects here in Vancouver, Canada.
Incredible.
Are you beyond Vancouver? Are you international or strictly in Canada?
So far, it has been in Canada. I'm an immigrant, and so actually a two-time immigrant. So I'm happy to, parachute into a new world and learn and discover and make friends, build networks. It's a gift or a skill that I've developed.
Awesome.
Awesome. I love it. So that's a bit about your story and what led you to entrepreneurship, but I want to take the show in a different way so we can talk about what you're working on and what you're really excited to be working on even more than that. We all have different sides of us, especially serial entrepreneurs. We know what it means to take on a few things. So tell me, what's the story and how you met what you refer to as your partner in crime, Chinobay?
Yeah, for sure. So I love music, live music. I don't play any instruments, but I seem to have a knack for organizing other talented musicians to come together and barbecue for them and entertain. I went to a concert where Chinobay was performing back in 2010 with his two brothers, and it was really amazing. The way that the music, the way that Chinobay was being, all the incredible sounds that were coming out that I'm so not used to because these were all indigenous instruments from Africa. And the message also that Chinobay was sharing with us, Chinobay's been a UNICEF ambassador, a youth ambassador. He's traveled to pretty much every country in Africa, 75 countries together. So I said, hey, after the concert, if you are still in town tomorrow, I'd love to invite you for dinner. And he says, yeah, we got together for dinner, invited a few other friends. We had a music jam and really, clicked. And Chinobay had a contract with the University of Victoria for 5 years where he'd come in to teach indigenous instruments to students. And every 6 months or so, he would stop on his way in and out at my place and we would hang out. One of the times the conversation started, what do you want to do when you grow up? I said, oh, I want to, being a builder, build schools in impoverished communities. And he said, well, what if it was a music school? I said, I'd love that. And so that's how, we launched into this long-term, beautiful relationship. And it opened up so many opportunities for so many children around the world to connect and exchange their cultures. Shinobi can say so much more about it. So
Yeah. So Chinobay, what was that like? You meet somebody, he can barbecue, but he maybe can't hold a tune. Maybe is that maybe you can hold a tune, but he can't play one.
I gotta ask Shinobi, do you always hang out with your groupies and fans like this? Like, hey, will you please come to dinner with me tomorrow night? Like, this happen to you everywhere you go, Shinobi?
No, it doesn't happen everywhere I go.
Okay.
And when it happens, I choose very carefully where to engage. But with Dima, it's different. Maybe he knew a bit about my background, but what triggers me is when people ask me questions that are not related to the activity that brought me in town, like music. Then I'm very curious why they're asking that. And I was right. So that's what led to everything else.
Do you remember one of those questions?
Yeah. During the show, I talked a little bit about why I make music beyond the sound, because people focus on the music. So I shared a few stories about my history and my work with children. So specifically, he asked me about the work that I'm engaged in outside music. What do I do when I'm not performing on stage?
Yeah.
That was the big question. And then we realized, that there's so much there to be shared. And that's what opened up a lot of opportunities and possibilities.
Awesome.
I love that. I always say, ask better questions. Would you share one of those stories? There must have been something that you shared about your work that even made him think he could ask that question.
Yeah, I'm a creative person, so I'm always creating. And creating means you're doing something that doesn't exist. So as a creative, each day I wake up, I'm always thinking what doesn't exist on earth and how can I make it exist? And that goes from food to imaginations. So that's how I would best describe it.
It's the most creative thing you just did recently.
The most creative thing I just did was researching and building a couple of electrical gadgets to amplify stuff I'm working on because they don't make it for the stuff I use. So I've built microphones, electronics, basically to amplify my instruments and make them create sounds like, triggers. So it's a lot to do with engineering, how sound triggers work, how you can make an instrument that sounds like string. How do you make it sound like a saxophone? So that's a lot in between, but
That is.
yeah. So that's what I just did recently.
Okay.
Wow.
Neat.
Okay. So I've been to Uganda. If I could sum it up in a word, my time there, it's joy. Like the humans I met, like I've never met more joyous humans. Every single little place, there was just always like this joy that exudes. So I'd like to understand, while there is lots of joy, plenty of joy, there's not a ton of opportunity for just everybody. And even those that might even be talented like you are, like it's still a lot of work. So somehow you then managed to cross the pond and have this 5-year contract with the university. Tell me about that. Tell me, my goodness, that's a big deal.
Thank you very much. You are absolutely right. What you just explained is basically what I'm trying to replicate in my life. So when I see every child out there, when I see everybody in Uganda that is younger than me, I see myself 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And I stand there so they can look at me and know that everything is possible. And that journey, takes a lot. The most important thing is to choose what to listen to. Many people have opinions and imaginations and perceptions about what you can be. So you have to be very careful what to take in and what not to take in, because voices that come inside, they can determine how we pursue life. And I think my own life and what people see as accomplishments, I see them as, results from effort and persistence is proof to that.
Yeah. Oh, incredible. Incredible.
So Dima, I'm listening to these stories right now. You meet him and all of a sudden he comes to dinner the next night. He sits down and here's this amazing guy. I mean, just telling you these stories. What was a story or something that stuck out to you that night at dinner?
I remember Chinobay telling me when he was a UNICEF ambassador, what was it? Some sort of a girl empowerment project? What was the name of the project you were?
The GEM, when UNICEF launched the Girl Education Movement, and it was a campaign to educate girls around the world because 70% of school dropouts, the research showed they were mostly girls. And that's when I joined UNICEF to campaign for education for girls.
Wow.
Yes. So then he tells me, Dima, going to these different communities in different countries in Africa, they have their own stories, their own indigenous traditions. And I go in some of the most poor communities. Some of them were even refugee camps. Then he says, but at the end of the day, I go back to a hotel with a warm bed and shower. And this is how UNICEF operates. They give me something that may cost hundreds of dollars a day, but the work that I do is with these people that have nothing. And so he just opened up this kind of idea to me that, even the people that do good work like UNICEF, you know, they never asked Chinobay he'd be okay with a lesser accommodation and put that towards another program or a project. There's like the standard that, let's say, the Westerners maybe are used to. So there's a lot of stories like this that make you think like, okay, how do we bridge this gap? And then if the person is willing, like what opportunities they have while they're contributing.
Mhm. Mhm. Incredible. Incredible. So over time, you two cooked up a plan.
Yeah. And for me specifically, I grew up in a family that was underprivileged, financially. And so there's not a lot of job opportunities for people in Uganda, even those that finish college. So
Right.
I was envisioning how now the music, the creative work that I do can develop and have value, and that value being a way of life in terms of income, in terms of sustainability, in terms of business. That is then when my journey took off to doing everything else. I decided to see music not as a way of making income, but as a platform to actually venture into different opportunities, to find that balance between community engagement, education as a passion, but also sustaining myself, in the future, my family, and actually making a living out of the same craft that makes me happy. And we have been working on all these projects, since then.
So
Yeah.
tell me more about that platform. You say now you're leveraging this music as a platform. Is that what you and Dima are working on together now? Is that the nonprofit itself?
The nonprofit is the way we support the world and to give opportunities to people. That's why it's called the World Bridge Foundation. Basically, a bridge connects people from around the world. It's just self-explanatory. But then what I meant in terms of venturing, for example, every instrument I played, I made myself.
Mhm.
And so I came on tour, people asked me, wow, your instrument looks very good. Where did you buy it? I'm like, I made it. Oh, you made it? So everyone seemed to be very surprised about something was kind of very natural. They're like, how did you learn to make it? Then I realized, oh, here people go to college and learn how to build something. But I grew up without access to toys and things like kids have here. So out of curiosity of being creative, I started to build things from papyrus reeds, from, the recycled plastics, everything. So the art of learning to build music instruments was around me. So then I began to build music instruments to sell them. And each time I play an instrument like the kalimba, people love it so much. And somehow they think, if they buy it, they're going to play it as great, which is fantastic. Crafting and building instruments became a business. And now the kids I work with who are musicians in Uganda, I can tell them, if you learn how to make these instruments and you go on tour, you make money being paid as performers, but you can make way much more money from selling thousands of instruments from around the world. And now they know it's true because they have seen that on tour. That's one. Number two, when someone buys an instrument from you as an artist, they relate to the person from who it came. So it's different buying an instrument from Amazon because you have no idea who made it. So we realize that as artists, we actually have power because the world is looking to have that connection to the individual, to the child. And they would rather have a product that they know came from somebody. So I began to learn how to find value in all those small components from being an artist and how to take advantage of that value and convert it into a business.
Yeah. In the West, I mean, obviously we elevate sports stars, athletes. And so then you hear about like a game worn jersey, right? Like that athlete scored 100 points. They did whatever, and they wear that jersey. Now all of a sudden that jersey has a lot of value. Or anytime that person wears a jersey because he used the jersey on the court or on the field or whatever, that has a lot of value. It's kind of interesting. You're taking that same methodology and same mindset and applying it to a business now for your musical instruments. You're saying, hey, there's a connection now, an emotional as well as an actual physical, because you can see them playing the instrument. It'd be like if we saw a guitar player or something in the US here, if after every time he was done playing the guitar, he sold off that guitar or all the guitars he used that day, right? Is that what you're kind of equating to a little bit?
I think it's close. But if Michael Jordan sewed, stitched, put that through a sewing machine, and then said, Nicole, I made this for you, or like, you can buy this from me. I mean, that right there, that's wildly. It's Taylor Swift, right? Taylor Swift, if you're listening, I bet you she'd do it. I bet she'd be like, here's your fringe made top. Like,
Yeah.
so this is the artist, like really, like not just the artist that can do those things, but then make the, or even the guitar player. Like,
Yeah.
let me see our Western guitar players
No, yeah,
even
I'm
know.
laughing. Yeah. Yeah, it would never happen. It would just
They can
never.
put
That's
strings
what
back on. I'll give them that. Yeah, man, Shinobi, who raised you, man? Because you are constantly scanning your environment at all times, which I think everyone who's an entrepreneur understands that, right? You are constantly scanning and listening for, what are people asking me? In every bit of your stories, you are scanning the environment all the time to figure out like what else is here or what's missing. Tell me, who raised you?
The world raised me. I
Right.
traveled when I was 9 years old, the first
Yeah.
time to Europe, being with my family and parents in Uganda, realizing that we don't have much money and life isn't going to change. The world started to raise me up in terms of, showing me lessons and
Yeah.
opportunities and curiosity and the desires to make things better. When I was younger, there was that reality of when an opportunity comes and it goes, you have no idea it's going to come ever. And you've been to Uganda and you know that education is not free. You won't go to a bank to get a loan to start a business. So when you have one opportunity, now you're thinking, how can my entire life change with this one opportunity?
Yeah.
And that is really important. When you're out here, you'll be like, you know what? Maybe the government will help me with some support. Maybe I'll get a food stamp. So you start thinking of the people who are going to help you. When you're in Uganda, no help is coming. So
Yes.
if you play
No
an
help is
instrument,
coming.
how can that instrument now be the key to everything? For
Mm.
example, with the music instrument building business, I wanted to do other businesses. Now me and my wife, we're starting like a food business here. But how are you going to fund it? So now the instrument making and other things is now the way we generate income now to invest. And now we don't have to get a loan because we'll probably never get. We need to let the world raise us. When you let the world raises you, you fall, you stand, you try, you fail, you turn this way, it's closed, you turn the other way. And then until you kind of figure out one way that works.
It seems like every time there's an opportunity, you don't have a choice but to make it work. So how does this all kind of come together where Dima comes in with the nonprofit World Bridge and everything?
Yes, absolutely. So I was talking pretty much of my business side, but throughout as a child, I wanted to make sure my music represents something beyond entertainment, something that truly feels real. When I was working as the UNICEF ambassador, I was going to refugee camps. I was going to children's homes. I was going to schools that had no funding, teaching music and dance to children. And that crafted my earlier days of being an artist. So as a musician, when I recorded my first album and I came on tour in 2007, most of the songs recorded on there were actually songs that were talking about making the world a better place. And so I was already doing philanthropy work. And when I met Dima, that's why it was very obvious, because when he asked me what I want to do, even though I was playing music, I want to make the world a better place, how I want to use my music to make a difference in the world. That's now what we're trying to figure out. So the nonprofit was created specifically to allow children who are struggling in the US with mental health, with being in underserved communities, and also children in Africa who think the world is so far and they cannot make it. See how the music can bridge that gap and bring them together. So in the US, I became an educator. I started to go to schools. And then I realized, the stories peddled by the media about Africa were mostly negative. There's only one story, but there's so many beautiful stories about people, about culture, about food, about fashion that were not shared. So the nonprofit now allows us to curate programs that allow children who have come from the most underserved communities come to the world and shine and build their self-esteem and tell their own stories in a way that is respectful, and when they have those standing ovations and performances and they go back to Uganda, now their own communities see them as heroes. At the same time, the nonprofit puts together all these touring programs, and those programs help the children raise money to actually support their education in Uganda. They earn it. They're not sitting back there with their hands stretched out. They are involved into transforming their own communities because now there's a sense of ownership and they know that you have to do something, to get help. So the nonprofit is the passion that we live. And that passion is not just for us, it's for the whole world. And then my music and performance and business is how I make a living and able to support the nonprofit.
So are you sending kids here in underprivileged, underserved communities on tours to Uganda? Is that how that's working?
It's the other way around. We're taking kids from Uganda to US.
Yeah, so we just finished a tour where we brought 15 students from Uganda. And these are students who have come from the worst imaginable situations in Uganda. Kids that people thought they can never do anything or become anything. And the goal for us to change that narrative is to mentor them, we train them, we transform their lives. They were homeless, they were living in refugee camps, they were living in the slums, and now they've been on tour performing all across the states. And we reached over 25,000 family members and communities across the US in over 15 states.
They were here in Chicago, but we missed him, Matt. I tried to work on my schedule, and I knew Matt had something, and I was like, okay, we're not going to make
We're coming
that.
back.
Okay, great.
Yeah, we're coming back. So now those children are back in Uganda. But now 20,000 families in the US talking about a connection to Uganda. And now, we are starting the exchange program of bringing families and students from the US to Uganda. Basically, with World Bridge, we want to make the world smaller by creating opportunities for people to connect and learn about each other. We don't want to tell people about Uganda. We want to bring Uganda to them. And we don't want to tell people in Uganda only about America, even though we do, but we want to give an opportunity for people here to visit. That's like the goal. So we have another tour coming this fall. And these tours go to schools, to festivals, to performing arts centers, and to communities. But just like my music, the goal is not just the performance, but it's for the performance to create an impact. My goal, my joy was to have businesses and design and be successful to a level where I can fund the project I am passionate about that are making a difference in the world.
How do we eventually get to this idea of the schools? Because that's what was really interesting to me when Dima started talking about using his natural abilities and what he's educated in, and eventually leveraging that to these potential music schools. Where do we see World Bridge going with that?
Yeah, so we want to build these music centers around the world, but we want to build them in the communities. So we don't take people out of the communities to the centers, but we bring the centers into the communities to have transformation happening within the communities. So the touring is the gateway to all that. Now, after all this tour, now the world knows there is a need to actually have people like, how can the kids that don't have a music school, don't have music teachers, don't have a music center, come to the US for 3 months and lead workshops? And where did they learn how to teach? Where did they learn how to lead workshops? Where did they learn how to speak English? So we have given people the result even before there's a platform. So now you can imagine when we have a music school in Uganda, one in Kenya, one everywhere, in all these communities and slums, now the results will be times 1,000.
And maybe I can expand a little bit on that. So the long-term vision and what we're doing right now is a bit of a prototype for the social enterprise hub that we're trying to create in Uganda, where it'll really be a place that will have an organic farm. There'll be other things besides music that it can go into, like other skills, employable skills they can build, because they're all really here to provide opportunities. They will, build instruments, they will do arts and crafts and other things. And so once we figure out a way to make that funding piece work without us being involved, because this program, Dance of Hope, started in 2012. And so some of these children have been in there for, 11 years now. And they started when they were 7, 8 years old. Now these kids are maturing and we need to figure out a way to keep them involved, because they have so much wealth of knowledge, talent, and connection to both the US and their community locally. Our dream really is to have multiple hubs like this that can, support each other, where we have a hub from Uganda that'll go to another country and they'll be the ones setting it up. They'll be ones coaching, training, concepts, and then allowing that group to travel around the world and perform and do arts education workshops, such that any presenter or a theater does not like to book the same 2-3 years in a row. They like something fresh and new. So if we have, 1 year it's Uganda, next year it's Brazil, another year it's, another country, that's what we're hoping to use the same channels to build this network of just spreading love. And through music, the international language, we can all connect.
Yes.
Mhm. Yeah.
Awesome.
So what you need today, though, is probably for a few more entrepreneurs to actually just enjoy some music. Matt, we should really take some time off, try to get away from the desk every once in a while. That's what Dima managed to do in order to
Yeah.
have some time at a concert. So you need people to attend this fall's events, right? So all across the US and Canada, or just the US?
I believe we're West Coast US this time.
Yeah, they're going to be announcing the 4 dates on World Bridge Foundation website. They
Yeah.
can go there and they'll go on the events, and the events will all be listed.
Okay, great. So in the show notes, we'll make sure to link that. And then you also need someone who's looking at their spring calendar that wants to invite you out to a show. Do you need new connections on schools or field trips or centers that want your art where they are?
Yes, we have like a study guide that's available, but we are booking now for 2024, 2025. So education institutions, middle school, high school, elementary and universities, performing arts centers, community centers. We are starting a program for people who are doing homeschooling where they can access our virtual trips. They will be ready by the end of the year. So people can still make a connection virtually through the virtual field trips that we are designing. The goal is reach as many people as possible because music is the magnet and the universal language that everybody speaks, especially children. It allows them to come together without filters. They just enjoy and they learn about one another and about the world.
Yeah. And then finally, I would think that the other thing that you need is certainly those who are excited to help either fund or point you to maybe grants. Are you guys interested in grants or grant writers who can help support 501c3? You can apply for those.
For sure. Yeah. We have the status and we'd love, volunteers. Maybe there's a certain skill that you have that you want to help us, shine together. Funding, grants, and we love those small engagement where we just have 50 people, or 30 people. So if someone wants to host like a house concert or something small in their community, we're totally game for that because this is where we build, real connections. And especially, the rural neighborhoods or towns, they don't have access to what let's say that Los Angeles has or Chicago. So those communities are in benefit because they might live a whole lifetime and never experience the magic that, we bring on tour.
Yeah.
What I was thinking about when I'm hearing both of you guys talk, both Nicole and I are the faith-based person that likes to give back and likes to be engaged in community and stuff. But I think so much of the time, it's so hard to be balanced. I'm quoting air quotes right now, in having a career, being an entrepreneur, seeking out all these opportunities, as Chinobay talked about, and yet trying to find this time of when do we give back and how do we do it? How do we remain balanced? It's like the entire time I'm hearing both of you talk, I'm thinking you guys are spending majority of your time in the nonprofit, but then yet I'm hearing about all this other stuff that you guys do to support yourself, support your families, and support the nonprofit. How do you guys find that balance? Is it a hard thing for you guys to do? Is it just natural?
Yeah, I will go first. So, one of my favorite quotes is I make a living with what I make and I make a life with what I give. And I try to live with that. So personally, I think it doesn't work for me to find time for this or for that. What worked for me was in pursuing my dreams, either through business, through the giving back and the compassion and the sharing has to be within that. Each time I come from work, I want to come home and go to bed and feel content. I feel happy that I helped someone out there. And it's different for everyone. I've been a little bit blessed that I've been self-employed doing what I'm passionate about. And I'm sure it's different for someone who has a job and then they need to split those hours. But I grew up in a community. I belong in the community. The community raised me and took me out to the world. And each time I travel the world and I come back in the community, I just feel that's where my energy, my creativity, my joy comes from. So for me to see children from a community where I grew up in Uganda today looking up to me and being their role model and seeing them grow from 6 years to 18 years. It's almost like if you said, let me pause this and wait for this perfect time, how many children will go hungry? How many children will die? How many children? So every day I try to figure out ways how I do both at the same time. And that's, yes, very difficult, but somehow every day I try to make that work.
See, there's no such thing as balance. Do what you love what you do.
How about you,
Balance.
Dima?
Yeah, I wouldn't say there's balance in my life, especially between work and this passion. I read a book, forget what it is, but it talked about counterbalance and how you focus on something for however much time you can, and then you jump onto the next thing that you want to focus on, and you just give it all you got. It's a real challenge. It really is, especially when you have, let's say, I don't want to say failure, but some step back at work, and then you experience another step back in the nonprofit side. You just got to remember that it's one no closer to a yes. At least this person knows about us, and maybe 2 months from now, 2 years from now, we can ask them again. And that no right now might be a yes tomorrow. I find it extremely rewarding. And when I do have a down day, I just do this philanthropy work, and it just lifts me. You look at any video online of these kids and the impact they created, and it just kind of dissolves all the bullshit that was going on in our life or the stories we tell ourselves. And maybe very quickly, I'd love Chinobay to share how he started going into schools in US and speak a little bit about going to concerts and never seeing kids.
So in Uganda, I worked with kids all my life. And then when I came to the US, I did 3, 4, 5 shows. I realized there are no children in the performances. So it was a bit surprising. So then one time I asked the audience, how many of you have kids? Everyone puts their hands up. I'm like, oh, great. Where are the kids? They're like at home. Like, oh, this is interesting. I did a little digging and I was like, okay, so I'm performing here. And all this asking me, each time I finish a concert, they ask me about my name, my music, the language I speak, the country, the weather, the wildlife, the music instruments. Like, they're so curious. And somehow their kids are not curious about that stuff. So I asked my agent and she said, well, in the US, kids don't really go for concerts. It's at home, parents go for concerts. I'm like, wow, what a wow. This is interesting. I really love kids. How can I, work with kids? Then she was like, well, if you want to work with kids, you have to go in the schools. I was like, great, take me in the schools. So I went to the first school and then I asked kids, who had a question. Literally, everybody put their hands up. So instead of performing at a school, I had an hour of answering questions. So I realized I was bringing more knowledge to students because adults were sitting back, relaxing, enjoying the music, clapping at the end of every song. And in a school, these kids are asking about everything, literally. Either they saw it in a movie or in a book. So I felt that there was a lack of global service learning among young people in America. They don't know much about the world. It's not taught much in the schools. They are detached from it. And then they end up at a college. And maybe the first time they speak to someone from another country is when they are in college. So then I realized, some of the underlying conditions in the US why, young people and people are not so familiar with the world because they are not brought closer to the world. So I made a commitment as a touring musician. I'm going to make sure I bring art to young people in the US. And that's how I ended up going to schools, especially underserved schools that don't even have the money to bring artists in there.
Incredible. I could listen to you all day, but you know what I could and would love to share with others? And we could do a link, but my editor, she's probably going to be scared when she hears this part. My editor, I think, would love the challenge of if you send us a music file, we will take the show out on your music if you'd send us a little something that we can play at the end. So everybody gets a little bit of it, whether they click the link or not, but hopefully they will. You guys, I heard so many places of need, and I can think of so many places that entrepreneurs who are problem solvers can fit in. So tell me, where is the best place to find you, to connect with you? Just give us like 1 or 2 at tops that people can find and connect with you.
World Bridge Foundation. That's the bridge where everybody comes and we meet on the bridge. And then we decide what we do when we are there.
I love it. So there's a form there. They can reach out and say, contact you, and they can get in touch right there. Okay.
Worldbridgefoundation.com. I just want to make sure I didn't
.org.
.org. Okay.
.org.
.org.
Come on, it's .org, Mr. Attorney.
I was making sure because
It will be linked.
We'll be
Will
linked.
be linked for sure.
Yeah, and
Uh,
we'll provide some social media as well that you can link. It'd be great to connect with more people.
Right.
Perfect. Perfect. Is there anything that we didn't ask you that you wanted to cover today?
Yes.
No, you're quite amazing. Yes? Okay.
Shinobi, what's your favorite thing to cook? I kept hearing about you and your wife cooking.
It's
and
good.
What he said, Dima said it's good. What's your favorite thing to cook? I just got to ask you that.
Eggplant.
Ooh, eggplant. And a recipe?
Yeah, well, it's
Grilled?
That's the secret because we are now running a food business. So yeah,
oh, okay, great.
So one last thing that I did want to mention, we are working with a wonderful screenplay writer, script writer. His name is Christopher. He's from Germany, and he's worked with 2 teenage girls on our team that wrote a children's book. And the book is called Combo's Dance. And so this book is going to get released this summer. And Chinobay is putting together a theatrical play that will be based on this book.
Excellent.
And so we would be happy to visit libraries, schools, and there'll be a pre and a post conversation as well. So it'll be a whole new experience, not like just a performance, but we'll dig deep into Uganda's culture and some of the specifics. I don't want to say too much right now,
Sure,
but
yeah.
yeah, look out for the children's book as well.
Okay, so when is that release date?
it's going to be in September.
And then tell me, is there a pre-order link or anything that we need to know about?
Yeah, there's going to be a pre-order link which will come out in August.
Send it our way. We'll add it to the show.
Shinobi, let me ask you
Great.
one more thing, though. You said one of the things you've noticed is that when you were going around the country and you were telling the story, before you know it, you're spending all this time essentially educating people on Ugandan culture and what it's like over there. What do you think is one of the biggest misconceptions Americans or Westerners have regarding your culture and where you're from?
This is another bigger conversation, but I feel the narrative created in the Western world is geared towards asking people for support like money. So a lot of stories would come, with the goal of creating sympathy. And that allows a lot of sad stories to come without even touching the beautiful things. People never get to see anything else. And that's very general. So when people hear about Africa, they hear about disease and war and poverty. But that is everywhere, even in America. People who have no money in Uganda, happier than people who have no money in the US, that's for sure. So my goal is to elevate the social joy and to make sure that the kids who people perceive have gone through poverty come out to the world smiling and dancing and shining, which is proof that regardless of your situation, your talent, where you focus, you have the power to create transformation.
Yeah.
And if you Google African children and go to images, then you Google American or UK children or Australian children, and you see the different images, that will tell you everything.
Wow. Great exercise to go do. Thanks, Dima.
Oh my gosh, the best smiling faces are the little kiddos I met in Uganda and Kenya. Just, oh my goodness. My goodness. Joy. That's the only word that I have for it. There's no other word that comes close to it. Joy like I've never seen before. So I'm so excited that you're doing this work. So excited to get to support you with this show. And we will make sure that when you're near us, we will come see you. I mean, shoot, we're always looking for a reason to travel, aren't we, Matt? Except without all the gear. Maybe at least some behind.
Yeah, no gear.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much for hosting.
Thank you so much.
Hey, it's Nicole, and that's the end of the interview. But stick around. This is the part where Matt and I break it all down and give you our favorite takeaways. Listen in.
One of the big things for me, I like that he used the word counterbalance. We talk about in the show so much about like trying to find this idea of balance. And yet here these guys are doing amazing things while also being entrepreneurs themselves. And then sometimes you don't really have balance. It's this idea of counterbalance. You're all in on something and you have to just go after it. Then, okay, now I got to go back to this other thing. And I'm imagining like a teeter-totter. You're running back and forth, just trying to like, but it's extreme sometimes. And I think that speaks to a lot of serial entrepreneurs,
Yeah. So I think what he said was so poignant. He said, well, because if I don't do it, if I take a pause, there's going to be a kid that goes hungry.
Yeah.
Right. So what's at stake for you or me and our business may not be, my kids. I mean, the one doesn't always want to eat anyway, right? But my point is maybe someone's not going to go hungry, but that is what's at stake. That's what he feels so strongly about. And that if we all had that place to give to, we might feel that strongly too, that well, balance
Yeah.
out the window. Who cares? Because I'm up to something bigger than myself and bigger than just the current task in hand, right? Like a lot of people on the show tell us like, well, I use this project management tool to manage my time. Okay. He's saying, forget managing my time. This is constant for me. I just want to be happy when I go to bed at night.
Another thing that really hit me, was when he talked about how when you're given an opportunity in Uganda, like there is no other choice. There is no fallback. There is no food stamps. It is life or death. It is the opportunity essentially to change the trajectory of you, your family, feed yourself, take care of yourself, take care of your family. And that there is no other choice. As entrepreneurs, we say the words burn the boats and things like that. We say it because like, oh, worst case scenario in America, you file bankruptcy or something. You know what I mean? You go get on whatever. There's always, and I don't say there's always a handout to save you, but like when you compare what he says that happens in Uganda compared to what happens here, there is always a handout. There's always a way out here. What he made it sound like is there isn't in Uganda. When you're given the opportunity, you have no other choice but to go do it.
Right. Yeah. He said the words like nobody's coming. And like we've heard Mel Robbins say that and love that, Mel, if you're listening. Yeah. When I was there, I got to play duck, duck, goose a whole lot with little kids, right? Like everybody understands like running around a circle at full speed. Kids also, rocks and stones were their toys. It was pretty interesting to me to watch that nobody needed a Nintendo Switch. They played games with whatever was around. But there was this one little boy that had, I'm not a doctor, I don't know, but some type of growth underneath his face. It was awful, man. And I remember looking at his face, playing Duck, Duck, Goose, knowing that he was happy and you could see his smile, but like growth that overtook his face. And I heard in the back of my head, like, nobody's coming. There was no ship at shore, which there probably was. There are ships that come and do medical cruises for these kiddos that if somebody could get him there, but he's so far inland, like nobody is coming. And that's so powerful. So to hear that when he said the world raised him, like he just took those opportunities, that we all can take a page from that book. If you really treat the things that come to you as an opportunity, grab it, go for it.
I think the other thing, and you said it first, and then it kind of just oozed out the rest of the episode, is the word joy.
Yeah.
These guys are joyful. Like he said, I put my head in, I know I'm happy because I did the right thing.
Yeah.
When he answered the question about the misconception about what we know in the Western world about Africa, about poverty, disease, war, and yet he said it best. He goes, we have all those things here.
Yeah.
And over there, you look at their kids, they're joyous still.
Yeah.
Over here, our kids are claiming they're starving because they just had food 20 minutes ago and they didn't eat everything on their plate.
Right.
And or they're bored because they can't have your phone or the Nintendo Switch. The word joy was the broad term that came from the entire episode for me. Like, am I finding joy in things? Am I setting an example of joy? Because I can be a pretty grumpy, miserable person, as you know. Like, it makes me go, what the heck's wrong with me? That it's really eye-opening is what it is.
Yeah. Truly, any Ugandan that I've even met here exudes some type of joy that I've never seen before. And I know what it is. It's that every single thing around them, even if they're here, is the opportunity that he talked about.
Yeah.
And we can't always see that because we're just here.
Right.
Our kid is already here. And when I think about raising kids in today's world, I think how important it is to make sure they're about something bigger than themselves. So many times as parents, they think that they're the center of the world, right? Like there's nothing bigger than them. I try to stop them, be like, look at that sunset, dude. That's bigger than you. Hang on. You got to wait a minute because I'm going to miss it. Right. And so Ugandans, my experiences of them have been like, they are just walking around like that's an opportunity. This is an opportunity and just so happy. And we all need a little more of that. So I'm so excited that that's what they're bringing to us in the US. If you're listening, folks, we always say,
keep listening.
You've been listening to the Serial Entrepreneur Show, produced by the team here at SmartCookie Media.